All right, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On NHL podcast. On today's episode, Adam and I will be discussing the vote that was turned down by the people of Arizona, Tempe, Arizona, to give the Arizona Coyotes a new arena and entertainment district. Where do they go from here? New episode of Locked On NHL. Adam Denker letting out the Birddogs. Let's do
For
it.
Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On NHL podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. From Locked On Avalanche, I am Chris Maselli. From Locked On Lightning, he is Mr. Adam Denker. And on today's episode, we will be getting to the final four of the NHL playoffs, where we think those series will head and kind of, I guess, give our predictions on what we think the Stanley Cup final will be. And if it's the offseason, some crazy things start getting thrown around about marquee superstar players somehow, some way, some reason being traded all over the league. So we'll get to that as well. But where we need to start today, Mr. Denker, is in Arizona, and it was a big deal. This vote that was going on in the city of Tempe, and the people who live there, the registered voters who live there, were voting on the future, really, of the Arizona Coyotes, and they needed a new arena. We know what's going on with them. They're playing at Arizona State for 2 more years. That was the plan. They played there last year, 2 more years, and then that would give them time to build this almost $3 billion entertainment district, which is going to bring thousands of jobs, incredible amounts of revenue, a new arena. It was just like a mini city that they were going to build, and the people turned it down. They voted no, and now it is all up in the air. What happens with Arizona? So I'll start with, were you surprised this did not pass? There was a big push to obviously get this thing passed by the Coyotes and by the NHL themselves, and it failed.
No, I'm not surprised, Chris.
Really?
I mean, listen, we all like to here and there root for the always underdog Arizona Coyotes, but listen, at the end of the day, let's call it what it is. And this is no disrespect to the fans, the players, the organization, but at the end of the day, this is Gary Bettman's brainchild. This is I think the only person that cares more about this team staying in Arizona than probably the fans is Gary Bettman.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And the experiment of the Arizona Coyotes we're starting to finally see is that it's a failure. I'm sorry. There's some good moments. They have good players. They've had good players throughout their history. But when you look at this team and this franchise, other than really a conference finals appearance, which was, one of their last couple of times in the playoffs,
Right.
what has this franchise done to get people in that area, in that state, excited about the sport of hockey? And you go from, the lack there of success, kind of just the ever kind of revolving door of prospects and coaches and all that. And then you throw a professional hockey team into a 5,000 seat arena on the campus of a college. I mean, everything that I've listed off I think speaks for itself. I don't see. I would be more surprised if there was anybody surprised other than Gary Bettman of the outcome of this vote. How did you feel about this? Really?
Well, I was a little bit surprised because I just feel like if a city has a professional sports team, like one of the 4 major sports, they'll do what they can to keep that team around. They should understand the value of that, and they should understand. I'm sure the people of Tempe understand that if this doesn't pass, that probably spells the end of this professional hockey team being in your city. So in that aspect, it was because people don't want to lose professional sports teams. Like when teams like the people of St. Louis are still reeling when they're and that's the NFL. You know, you lose an NFL team, that is a big deal. I'm not, and losing a hockey team is not on par with losing an NFL team, but it's one of the four major sports. It's a professional sports team. I thought they would see the value of that and say, hey, if we have a professional hockey team, yeah, they're not that good, and it's been a struggle since they've moved here. But we have this brand new, this whole entertainment district that we are going to build from scratch, and that'll put us on the map, and maybe that'll entice some people to come here free agent wise. You know what I mean? It's a brand new start for a team that's been there for a couple decades, right? and I think the people were just like, we're not going to let this team build this thing that really we're not excited about almost. And they have tried so many things since they've been there to turn this team into something to give the people of Arizona. And you'll get it for maybe one season, but it's nothing that lasts. You even had Wayne Gretzky in on this franchise for a little while, and that didn't do so well either.
And nobody cared about that.
No. So I think it's the people of Arizona saying, like, you've tried enough. If this was within the first 10 years of the team being there, this passes. But and then all of the stuff with even, them defaulting or not being able to pay the old arena that they were in, I think that people saw the writing on the wall that just because we give you these fresh new buildings doesn't mean you're going to give us a good team back.
Well, the way you just phrased that entire statement, Chris, I think pretty much explains itself. A team that's been around this long, maybe if they get a new arena, they'll start to get some momentum underneath them, and the excitement will build. And you kind of beat me to the punch there at the end. I mean, come on, Chris. This team has been in Arizona since 1997. And we're still talking about in 2023 building excitement around the franchise.
I know,
man. And you
know.
spoke about, other St. Louis as a comparison. The one thing that's different between the two teams is that, and not to pat ourselves on the back as people who work in hockey, but it's easier to sell football, baseball, basketball wherever you go. I think we could agree in all 50 states. Every state that doesn't have an NFL baseball or basketball franchise would kill to have one. Hockey is a little bit different outside of Canada. I think we could all agree it's a little harder to sell.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties in with kind of looking forward for this franchise. What is the next stop? I've been seeing on Twitter the bandwagon for the Atlanta Thrashers coming back.
Yeah.
I don't know how realistic that is. I've seen all season long, and it's kind of funny the timing of this, considering Elliot Friedman from 32 Thoughts and Hockey Night in Canada actually posted something on April Fool's Day saying that the Coyotes were moving from Arizona and going to Houston. So maybe that's kind of like a Simpsons foretelling kind of moment right there.
Well, that's one of the cities you hear getting thrown around is Houston. You do,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, and maybe I'm just kind of, I've always kind of been in that bandwagon for always ever. I think that this team goes back to Quebec City. What about you? I mean, are we looking kind of staying in the United States? I think that Bettman is not he's gonna take this L, but he's not gonna completely go send a team back to Canada with his tail between his legs, because as we all know, Canada doesn't really like Bettman for that reason of taking NHL franchises and moving them to these states.
I don't know why Bettman is so dug in on this, right? Like for some reason, there's been teams that have relocated and moved around during his tenure as commissioner, but for some reason, and I think this was the first one that did when he became commissioner, maybe I'm wrong on that. It doesn't even matter if I'm wrong. If this was the first one, I don't know why this is the one that he just won't let go. And he just wants this to work. And maybe this is the thing where it finally kind of clicks in him. Like we got to move on. They've already said they're playing at Arizona State next year.
Yeah.
They've already said that. So which I understand. Relocating a team, you don't just do that. You don't do the who was it? The Cleveland Browns just packed up. It was the Baltimore
Colts,
and they just overnight packed up, and like that doesn't happen anymore, right? So there's a lot of stuff that has to happen. So it doesn't surprise me that they are going to play. They probably will play the next 2 years, if you ask me, because it's Bettman. He wants this still to work somehow. So he will ride. They said 3 years at Arizona State. They will play those 3 years. I fully believe that, and then figure something out. If they do have to relocate, I don't think it's going to be Arizona. It's not going to be Quebec. I just don't think Quebec has the market for a professional sports team right now. I don't think they do. I would love it, but that would be a really, really small market. And if it's not working in Arizona, it's not going to work in Quebec. I think Houston makes the most sense. It's a big market. You have an immediate rivalry with another Texas team right off the bat. I think that makes the most sense to me. So if it happens, I'm not sold that it does, man. I think Gary Bettman will try every corner of that state to keep them in Arizona before it happens. It's not going to happen for the next 2 years because they're going to ride out the Arizona State thing before they even consider it.
Yeah, my thing with that though, and I agree with you with the time frame. I think that's the more likely scenario. My thing is from the other 31 owners' perspective on this is that obviously everyone gets a share of the pie with revenue.
Right.
And when you're sharing that revenue, clearly, you're going to have to give up a little bit more considering Arizona with 5,000 seats in the building. You're not really raking in a lot of, money on a nightly basis. And that's if you sell out, which I didn't watch one home game last year, only when the Lightning were there. But I don't really remember ever seeing anything where that place was really sold out. I might be wrong, but
I don't know. I could go back and look at I would hope so.
My thing is, though, I kind of would figure that Bettman's going to get some pressure from the other owners saying, listen, you need to figure this out. Either get them into a real arena and start to or bring someone in to kind of, because I was actually talking to a friend last year. We all have these conversations. Let's open up a business together. We should buy a franchise together. I think we were looking up, I think it was when the yearly report from Forbes came out about all the rankings. I think at that point in time, it may have changed. It may have gone down. It may have gone up. But I believe at that point in time, the Coyotes were the only team in the league that was not worth $1 billion.
I don't think so. I can't buy that.
You don't think so?
No. I think there's a lot of teams that are not worth $1 billion in the NHL. There's only a couple teams that are worth $1 billion. I don't even think your Tampa Bay Lightning are worth $1 billion. Maybe no. You know what? I think they just made the $1 billion mark.
Yeah. So watch your tongue, sir.
I think the majority of NHL teams are not worth $1 billion. Believe it or not, including my own Colorado Avalanche. They're not even worth $1 billion.
No, they don't use. They don't use that currency in Colorado. So. No, but I just think that we're going to see some more pressure from.
Oh, absolutely.
To kind of just for him to get this figured out. Let's not wait until year 2 when now you're talking about this team is basically being stranded in Arizona because who's going to take them in. Where at that point, back to your reference with the Baltimore Colts, we might see an overnight situation.
If they do that.
At that
Can you imagine that in this day and age with social media?
That would break the internet.
Uproar,
regardless of if you're a hockey fan or not. That would be probably honestly, we always complain, Chris, about how there's, we always hit this snag in the offseason where we kind of get those dead weeks and months in the offseason. This might be one of the greatest stories of the offseason for probably the next couple of years until they figure it out.
So until they figure it out
for it, let's drag it out
Yeah,
And
because it's the great unknown. There's no answer
exactly.
right now. The Arizona Coyotes are up in the air on where they're going to be, and you're right. It's going to be a story for a while. Two things. Last things I want to mention about this is um, the voting. There was 3 propositions. They all failed, and there was like 29,000 votes.
Yeah.
And like I said, this was open to registered voters of Tempe, which I looked up. The population out there is over 100,000.
Yeah.
So not a lot of people came out to actually vote for this thing, which is kind of surprising on the number of percentage of people that live there that actually voted. So that's surprising. And finally, I just feel bad. I feel bad for the people who are those diehard Arizona Coyote fans and love hockey and love the fact that they have an NHL team, and their favorite team might be moving away. And that's always disheartening. That's always tough to see. So you feel bad for them. And I also feel bad for the guy who drew all these renders, because he drew this whole beautiful thing up, and he's never going to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, I will say the area and the arena, at least from the outside, looked really nice.
Beautiful. Like, and where they were going to put it was like an old used like dump, like city dump. So you could have had this beautiful entertainment district, and instead the dump is going to remain, I guess, unless they would do something else with it. But it's not going to be a Coyotes arena. All right, we're going to get to some crazy trades that Mr. Denker threw at me right before we hit record, and we didn't even talk about him because I'm like, let's just do this on the air. So we're going to talk about that next. But first, we are going to discuss Birddogs, brand new sponsor here at Locked On. You get your Birddogs in the mail, sir?
Yeah, man. Love the pants. Got a nice free koozie on the side as well.
Well, it's like a Yeti cup we got.
Yeah, it really is. It's super nice. I could wear comfortable shorts while drinking some nice cold or hot beverage in my nice little Yeti cup or whatever you want to call it that Birddog gave us. So
the material that they're made out of is top of the line. I told Kyle on our show, like, these are shorts that I could wear just lounging around the back deck, like you said, with a nice cup of coffee, or going out and playing golf. There it is, right there. And he,
on our
like,
YouTube page.
when we were talking about it, he started drinking it. Did you notice on the bottom of the cup it has the impression of the Birddog right on the? I mean, come on, they thought of everything now.
I've been drinking out of this thing for 2 days and I haven't noticed.
And you didn't notice that, right?
No.
So the 3 things you get with Birddogs is a fit, comfortableness, and versatility. Those are the 3 things that stand out to you when you put on a pair of Birddog pants or shorts. So go over to birddogs.com right now, and even go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in that custom Birddog Yeti style tumbler that Denker had right there. You get that for free. And we all know how much those things cost, right? So you get that bad boy for free. So birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. If you're watching on YouTube, you see it right there on the bottom of your screen. Put in that promo code LockedOnNHL for that free Yeti style tumbler. All right. I love the NHL offseason for a number of reasons. All the wheeling and dealing, the draft, free agency, players coming and going, and the ridiculousness of some of these trade things, these trade proposals that are thrown around on social media. Absolutely love it. And when a team like Toronto once again fails to meet expectations, you get some interesting ones. So what was the one that you said to me before we went live? And I didn't say a word. I breathed some air through my nose after you said it.
Yes. So just to let our listeners and people that watch us on YouTube know how this went down. So Chris and I, we kind of just throughout the day before we record later on, we always kind of text back and forth about ideas. And then, right before we hit the record button, I just remembered a post that I saw on social media about, and it had to have been posted by a Maple Leafs fan. I don't see an Edmonton Oilers fan posting this, but
it had to be a disgruntled Toronto fan, or a fan of any one of the other teams other than Edmonton. Had to come from that.
Yes. So
And you know where we're going with this if we're throwing out Edmonton. But
so
go
the
ahead.
post was, I don't remember and if you find it, put the link in the comments below
Yeah.
this video, because for the I was scrolling through Instagram a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And the post was, I don't know if it was a question or just a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Should the Toronto Maple Leafs trade Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews for Connor McDavid? And when I said that, people, and Chris had his head down, kind of, doing his thing, getting set up. I've never seen Chris more alive in the time that I've known him than I did in that moment when I said that. And
yeah,
money aside, Chris, with that,
yeah, that's the big one.
the question is, the question more is for me, whether you're an Oilers fan or a Toronto fan, because I think, and this might be controversial within itself, because remember, in this deal, you also have Draisaitl waiting for something to come back or not come back in Edmonton. Do you make this deal? And I'm going to start it off, and then I'll let you have the floor, Chris. I think if you make this trade, if you can make the money work, this is a win-win for both teams.
It's not a horrible deal. I mean, it's not. You're getting great players no matter which side you're on. So I think it's less than who would say no, as they always like to say in trade deals, like who says no. And you kind of really have to think about if you want to kind of uproot your team and bring in, you're trading superstars for superstars.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't see where it would really come down to is the money side of things. I don't know how Edmonton does it. Edmonton has zero money to begin with. You can't bring, like, you can, because isn't Marner making more than Matthews right now?
I think so.
Check him out.
But as you're looking it up, my thing is with it is that, and we kind of spoke about this last summer with the Huberdeau and Tkachuk deal, who really wins out in the end. And I don't know. I think it's an interesting trade to think about, because I think McDavid's up in a year or two. I know Matthews is up after next year. And
yeah.
I there's been a lot of talk in the media, I know, especially after the series, that a lot of people think that Mitch Marner needs a change of scenery, because he's just, I don't know, I think at this point he's just, he's usually a cool, calm, collective person, but it seems as though he's kind of like overwhelmed by the Toronto media, because, he's one of the few players on that team, I think, that really kind of stays in Toronto year round. So I could see him being overwhelmed, where, who wouldn't make that trade as a Maple Leafs player, because you're trading two good guys for the greatest player of the generation, who is a hometown kid. Right. At the same time, if you're Edmonton, you also got to look at it as like, are you getting Connor McDavid, but in two players? Like, does Matthews and Marner make up for a McDavid alongside with Draisaitl?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it wouldn't be the worst deal. But I think you're just trading, like, it's the names that you're trading, and like those guys are kind of right now synonymous with those teams. That's not a reason to not trade somebody, right? If it's not working, you need to kind of blow something up and make some moves. You do it, but you can't with these cap numbers. Matthews is 11.64, and Marner is just under 11. That's over $20 million you're taking on, while you're giving out 12 and a half. So it's a net gain of like $8 or $9 million. You don't have that money if you're Edmonton. It can't happen.
Toronto definitely has to retain players. That's 100% guaranteed. Plus, they would probably have to take back. They would probably have to trade. I mean, take another contract alongside that, and then plus you would probably have, obviously, draft picks probably exchanged.
Probably, like, it wouldn't be a 2-for-1 deal. This would be a mammoth deal where a lot of players are going back and forth and numbers are going back and forth. But it's interesting. But does Edmonton really want to give up the greatest player, like you said, on the planet
again.
In his absolute prime. I don't even know if he's hit his prime yet. You know what I mean? You still have a decade plus with this guy, and you really want to give him up now? And you've done it before. Like, you can bring it up too with Gretzky. I don't think they want to go back down that road again, even though you'd be getting those two guys in return. It makes sense, and it doesn't make sense. It's a very odd way that you have to kind of like look at this, more than just like the players. It's the culture of these fan bases, and who would I think Edmonton would revolt. I don't think Toronto would. Where Toronto's standing right now, because they still have that bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
The Toronto fans want to see this thing blown up. And I have even seen Marner for Cale Makar. That ain't happening, folks. That is not happening. It will not happen. But like the Toronto fans and Toronto media seem to be parading around every single player on this roster. Nobody is safe right now, it seems, in Toronto.
I'm going to say one thing, Chris, and then I'm going to ask you a question. The first thing I'm going to say is that I think if we see some sort of blockbuster deal involving Toronto and another team this offseason where you have either Matthews or Marner involved, it would probably be for goaltending. Samsonov played very well, but at the same time, I mean, this is 1 year. I mean, he's still very unproven.
Right.
I think that, a name that would be interesting, because he kind of talked about it in his exit interview, about, kind of some sort of uncertainty for the future. A name that comes to mind that Toronto could possibly go after is Connor Hellebuck.
I'm hearing his name getting thrown around. Yeah. I don't know.
And then the question I have for you is that if a hypothetical deal were to go down involving McDavid, Matthews, and Marner, does that trump the Gretzky trade to Los Angeles as the most infamous trade in NHL history?
God, man. Yeah, it would definitely be up there, because it's almost like 2.5 Gretzky-like players being moved for one another. Like, the Gretzky deal was Gretzky was the top name, and nobody else was even close to him in that deal.
Didn't they like lose in the conference final that year or something previously? Like, it wasn't like that they were.
No, they were. Yeah, they were an okay team. They weren't a terrible team by any stretch.
I know they won the cup like 2 years later.
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
But this would be up there in sheer, like the names, superstars. Like, yeah, that'd be close. That'd be close to it. It'd be shocking if it happened. I think there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't, because I don't think, the money is one thing.
Yeah.
Edmonton is not looking to trade. Like, this is all fun to talk about. And this is what we do in the off season, but something like this is not going to happen, because Edmonton is not, I don't feel, is looking to trade the best player on the planet. And I don't think Toronto is. Toronto needs to make some changes, and needs to bring in some new blood and get rid of some. Like, they need some change there. Edmonton does too. Don't get me wrong, but in Toronto, you keep those two guys as part of that the change. Those two guys are you don't move guys like that. They don't come through the door all the time. So you keep them. All the other pieces, you can say everybody else is on the block. I think Marner and Matthews are untouchable. They just are. It's just the way it is. This is fun. It's fun that we're doing a segment on this, but it's not happening.
I think we need to get the guys from Locked On Oilers and Locked On Leafs on the show to talk about this, because I agree with you. Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen.
No.
But the more we talk about it and speak it into existence, the more I could see it happening.
For McDavid, or just Matthews and Marner getting traded?
Between these two teams, for McDavid, Matthews and Marner, the M&M trade.
No, that is not going to happen. 0% chance. And I think it's a 0% chance that Matthews and Marner even get traded to anybody.
So you're saying it's more likely to happen that Marner is going to get traded from Makar. Got it. All right. Cut that. Make that the preview.
Never. don't edit this by me that I say that, Makar and Matthews, it's happening. It's 100% done. 0% chance. I don't think those guys are going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. So, all right. Time to move on from that because that's just a ridiculous conversation. Let's hear from who do we got? eBay Motors. We got eBay Motors here. And then we're going to talk about these Final Four teams quickly. So for the championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. And it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors with an eBay guaranteed fit. You can be sure every part that you need fits right the first time around. Just add your car to the My Garage tab and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices over at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. All right, sir. Running a little bit long here, but we did want to, the Final Four gets started Thursday. So what are we thinking for these two series, and who do we think will eventually be playing in the Cup final? We'll start with the Panthers and Hurricanes. What are you thinking?
I'm saying Canes in 7. I just think that the Canes are one of the most complete teams in that's left. I think I said it a couple of weeks ago when we were still kind of at the end of the first round. I look at this team and I really don't see any flaws except maybe in their goaltending, and even that has been pretty good throughout the course of the playoffs. It's been a fun ride to watch, even as someone who covers a team that's the rival of the Panthers, to see them go on this ride. And they're a very good team, and they surprised a bunch of people just by beating Boston. And I'm really excited to see how they go next year and how they could capitalize from this. But I just think that when you run into a team that has a ton of experience as Carolina, that has the tools from top to bottom, that has the amount of depth, I just think that at that point they're going to run into a wall, and that's when the magic ends.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think this is a 7-game series. And I think it's because the Panthers are just overly confident right now.
Yeah.
Like nobody expected them to be here. So I think they're just going to go in, play a little bit loose. More of the pressure is on Carolina. So maybe they're pressing a little bit, which maybe gives the Panthers an edge in a couple games. But the Panthers have shown like they can hang. They can hang, and they can hang on the road. They've been fantastic on the road in these playoffs. So going into enemy territory does not scare them. And playing in that arena, I've been in that arena in Carolina. It can get loud. But I don't think it bothers them. So yeah. I think they are a confident team right now. And, you beat Toronto, you beat Boston. To them, they feel like Carolina's a footnote. But Carolina is not a footnote. Carolina is a very, very good team. I picked Carolina in the beginning of all this. My final was Avalanche Carolina. So I'll have maybe half of that, right? So I agree with you. I think the things go 7. Panthers make it a series. And we said it before. They were hot heading into the playoffs, and you can't ignore that. It's not just like they struggled. They were scratching, clawing to get into the playoffs, and then they turned it on in the playoffs. They were turning it on a month before the playoffs even started. They've just continued it. So I think this goes 7, but I do think Carolina gets the 7th game at home. Head to the other one on the West Coast. You got Dallas and Vegas. What are you thinking in this one?
I think we have the same picks on this one too. I'm saying Dallas in 6. I watched that last game against the Kraken, and the Kraken, they were another team that kind of ran out of magic there at the end. But what I saw from Jake Ottinger and what I saw from Dallas, I saw a team that's going to go out there and really just take it to the other team. Jake Ottinger didn't look like a dominant goalie in that game. At the same time, I think we've yet to see his best throughout this stretch, and I think
He's
that
good
we're
in
going
game
to start.
7. That Kraken game, he was good in game 7.
Yeah, he was good, but
Yeah.
I don't think he was dominant. I think there's another level that he has not reached yet. And I think we're going to see it in this series against Vegas. Vegas is one of those teams that they just strike me as they want to go out there, they want to bully you, and then they're going to just chip away at you as the game goes on. They went tit for tat they played, I believe it was Edmonton, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they went to okay. So yeah, they went tit for tat with Edmonton, and that's admirable when you're playing against Draisaitl and McDavid. But obviously as you go down the line with Edmonton, you kind of start to see some cracks. But I think with Dallas, they're rolling right now. They have a lot of talent from top to bottom, and I think they're just a different team, and I think that's going to win out for them. They also have a couple of veterans that have been around the block.
Sure.
Tyler Stegan, he's won a cup, so he knows what it takes to get there.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be Dallas in 6.
You said that we'd be in agreement on this pick, and I'm in agreement with you in theory. That's who I want to win this series is Dallas. I would want Dallas to win this series in 4 games because you know me, like I am not a Vegas Golden Knight fan at all. But I have to be objective here. And
that's objective.
And not just being objective is picking Golden Knights to win this series. And I think they will. Part of it is one team. Well, I shouldn't say it. Both teams are playing by the rules. One team is, at the cap limit. The other one is putting a $96.4 million team out on the ice in Vegas. It's tough to compete with that. And I just feel like Dallas is a good team. Ottinger will keep them in it because I think he will raise his game. But I just think that Vegas knew what they were doing all season long. And I think they're a better team than Dallas. They are a better team than Dallas because they have like 10 guys that are making $10 million on it. No, not that much, but I'm bitter. I'm bitter because I just don't like how Vegas does business. And in this instance, it's going to get them into the Stanley Cup final. So it's going to be a Vegas and Carolina final, which I think will be a very good final, which we won't predict that right now, but we'll talk about the final when it is the final. I think it's Vegas in 6. You have Dallas in 6. I have Vegas in 6. Unfortunately, I'm rooting for your pick though, if that gives you any solace. Yeah.
Wow. I knew you were petty against Vegas, but
that's not petty. I laid it all out why that's not petty. That's facts, sir. There's a difference between facts and pettiness.
To our listeners, if you hear some of the things he says off air about Vegas, you would know it's pettiness.
I have no problem recording my off-air comments about the Vegas Golden Knights and putting them up on a website not called Locked On. So yeah,
we'll do Chris and Adam after hours unplugged.
Locked On late night, baby. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Locked On NHL. Thank you for tuning in and making it your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. Follow Mr. Adam Denker with the Locked On Lightning podcast over on his social media outlets. You can see his Twitter name right there on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. And check out myself and my co-host Kyle Sullivan over at Locked On Avalanche. All right, enjoy the conference finals, and Adam and I will be back next week to discuss how they're going, see where we're at. All right, guys, enjoy the games. We'll see you next week.